1. So I was working as a part-time for this startup firm. The firm is related to hydrogen production. I had this task of finding suppliers who would be willing to build us a prototype-scale hydrogen separator from syngas. Now, the technology needed, I will call it PHF, porous hollow fibers, and it is a very highly researched technology. And almost any string that you search, you are going to come across tons and tons of research papers on the topic. I did, of course, use a variety of tricks for efficiency and filtering results, and so managed to find some sources. It did take me more than a day or two of filtering the sites to find some reliable sources. Now, besides me, there was this other senior PhD professor who was also helping with this task. He said to my boss, "There's this site, go check it," and I was given the recording of that call to follow it up. And for the love of God, I couldn't decipher the name of the firm that our PhD guy was saying. I asked my boss very nicely, "What am I overhearing? Is this John firm?" But no matter what type of string I searched, I could not find something relevant to what we needed. My boss eventually caved in and talked to the professor again, who got the name of it in text this time. Now, the site was Johnson Matthey, and if you are familiar with that site, it's mainly a catalyst manufacturing site, I believe, and besides that, it has tons of scholarly article reviews. I'd already gone through that site, and I knew there was nothing but a paper about the tech we were looking for, so I told my boss that this is a research site, and they don't sell products like that. At most, I can find tons of catalysts on it, but that is all. But my boss assured me that he's a PhD and he knows better, and how I should just go look. I spent more than 2 hours on that site and looked up every single reference to hydrogen, separator, and fibers, and eventually told my boss the same thing. That is not what the site is for. So the next day I come into the office. My boss starts sending me telegram messages, and I'm screen notification reading it. Boss sends link, and then Google is free, it took me 2 minutes. I read that from screen notifications, rolled my eyes, gave it 5 minutes, and then tabbed into the links to read through. Now, unfortunately, my boss edited out the message. It took me 2 minutes, but I knew my boss had sent it earlier, so I go through my boss's links, and I kid you not. The first link was about cars, the second link was about catalysts, and the third link was about a rooftop firm that uses some sort of membrane. And just like the amazing employee I am, I took the next 3 hours of my time making notes on everything that was on those sites. Making a report and then telling my boss, "Hey, so I spent some time on those websites that you sent me. Website B was about blah blah blah," and after my report was over I said, "I have very diligently viewed the sites that you forwarded me, but as I reported earlier, I could not find any relevance to what we are looking for. However, if you want me to further pursue it, I can write them up in an email to inquire to. The sources that I have found have already been verified for possessing the tech that we are looking for. Sadly, while searching takes a click, filtering the results is the real work." Even though boss person still made me email Johnson Matthey, and I forwarded their confused reply back to my boss, it still felt good to see how the boss's 2 minutes worked out. But the boss's passive-aggressiveness grew, and I just had to quit before I sunk to the same level. 2. So a number of years ago now, I worked at a printing company. They took me on, and 9 months later, they were shifting all operations out of London, so no long-term job for me. A move of the entire operation like that would have been a long time in the planning, so they must have known it when they took me on. I said as much to Ken, the manager, and had a stand-up argument with him in front of everyone. I was only 19, and his belittling of me didn't go down well with me at all. So one Friday evening, before we all shut down, I decided to make a quick phone call. At that time, pre-internet, this was 1990, you could call directory inquiries to find out telephone numbers. "Excuse me, do you have the number for the talking clock in Australia?" "Yes, here it is." So just as I left, I direct called the talking clock in Australia and left it on the line over the entire weekend. International calls were expensive at that time, and talking clock calls had additional fees. Also, at the same job was a guy called Wally. He was 27. I was a budding DJ at this time, spending a lot of my wages on records. He was also a DJ, but had limited to zero success. However, this didn't stop him telling me how good he was, how much better he was than me, who he knew, and all this bullshit. He also had a habit of making fun of me in front of others in a cruel way. He would have been an easy target to hit back because he had a stutter, but I never did. He was also the type that if you told a story, of course, he'd done it bigger and better, and would always want everything to be about him. A complete cock. Unknown to him, due to the impending relocation of the printing works, and he was moving with the company, I had secured another job elsewhere and had handed in my notice. So I approached him to see if he could get me some weed. Of course he could, which was cool. He wanted me to pay £120 for an ounce. At that time, it was £15 for 3.5 grams, so he was basically giving me no discount at all for the weed. Which I could have got anywhere, to be honest. So one Friday lunchtime, we hopped in his car and headed to his flat in Putney to pick it up. While there, I met his flatmate, who happened to be playing a tune on one of the decks they had. "Shit, what is that tune?" I asked. "You'll have to find out for yourself," his mate said. So not only was Wally a wanker, but his mate was too. Driving back to work, I asked Wally, "Is it okay to give you the money on Monday for the weed? That's when I get paid." "Yeah, no problem," he said. That was my last day at the job, and I never saw Wally again. I went home with a big bag of weed and had a week off before I started my next job, and smoked the lot of it between me and my mates. Fuck Ken and fuck Wally. 3. So my partner and I moved into a new place a few months ago. We had been furnishing the house, but were struggling to find a nice and affordable outdoor furniture set for the lovely outdoor area. In my country, we have something similar to eBay we would use to bid on second-hand furniture. However, everything that we liked would skyrocket to almost brand new prices. This went on for weeks, and not much luck. I honestly thought about just building one. So we were catching up with my partner's friend, who I already don't really like that much because she is always stirring shit and causing drama, and she mentioned that they were getting a new outdoor furniture set. Huzzah, I thought, as their current one was still in reasonable condition and a perfect size for what we needed. I asked my girlfriend to see if she would sell us their old one, which I valued at maybe around $150. But I decided to offer them $200 to make it a win-win situation. The friend agreed and said sure, as they also thought it was worth about $150, but was happy to accept the $200. Or so I thought. 2 days later, I was on the eBay-like website just having a browse, and I saw their furniture set online for $200. Immediately, I told my girlfriend to ask what was happening. Turns out her friend, without alerting us, looked online and decided she would rather put it up for auction to see how much she could get for it. I mean, that's fine, and I get it, but the fact we had already paid her, had verbally agreed that we were buying it off her, and then she listed it without even telling us, that just didn't sit right with me. She gave us the money back, and I kid you not told us, "You guys should bid on it and see if you can win it." Abso-fucking-lutely I will. So because I'm a petty a-hole, I started a fake email account and proceeded to win the auction. I even overbid by a few hundred to make them think they had just sold an ancient lost artifact. This is where the fun begins. I created a very convincing-looking email signature and profile to communicate with her as my new alter ego, Steve Barnett, outdoor furniture connoisseur. I would talk to her in all caps to really give off those rich boomer vibes and delay each response by 4 days to make it as painful as possible. This went on for maybe 5 or 6 weeks. I would say my son was coming over this weekend and then respond the next week saying he couldn't make it. Then my nephew was coming over and again he got held up, basically tormenting her because I'm a piece of shit who will abuse the system to get my way. Anyway, we caught back up with the friend, maybe 2 months after all this began, and would you believe it, they still had their old furniture set. They had to cancel their new set because they couldn't get rid of the old one and had nowhere to store it. I had some cash with me, so I offered her $100 right there and then for it, which she reluctantly accepted, and I took the set home with me. A few weeks later I came clean to my girlfriend about it, and she thought it was hilarious. She's the one. 4. Some years ago, I was a 25-year-old man and broke up with my girlfriend of 24. She had cheated on me after 7 years together, and where we lived, we had a 1-month notice to leave our apartment. In order not to pay 2 rents, I had to wait until the end of the notice before moving out. In the end, she kept the apartment with a new roommate, but we still had to pass the landlord's inspection to get our security deposit back. I moved out something like 5 days before the inspection date, and living with someone you dumped for almost a month can be hard. She was either trying to convince me to stay with her or making my life miserable because I dumped her. As you can guess, when I moved out, I wasn't thrilled to know that I'd have to come back some days later to refill holes, repair some stuff, and clean the apartment with her before the inspection. But hey, I'll do it. So just before leaving, sitting in my car about to start the engine, she tells me, "You better really help with the cleanup. You either clean really good or I keep the security deposit." Maybe a bit of context was lost in translation because this discussion wasn't in English. The way she worded it could mean either a threat or a choice. The tone and context sure enough clarified that it wasn't supposed to be a choice. Some things to know. I sure don't love doing chores, but cleaning isn't an issue for me. For her, most of it isn't either, but in the 7 years we were together, she never cleaned the toilets or the bathtub drain. Because it disgusted her, so I did it, and she did other stuff to compensate. Money-wise, I was working as an IT engineer and she was a student, so the security deposit, about 300 or 400 euros each, may be huge for her, but I didn't care that much. So I simply replied, "Okay." She looked at me a bit confused, not understanding my answer. I said, "Okay, keep the deposit and do it all by yourself." I didn't wait for an answer, drove off, and when I arrived I messaged the landlord, with my ex in CC, telling them to send the full deposit to my ex and none to me, and I never set foot in the apartment again. 5. This is an old story from around 2015. I was, at the time, a college student, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I was living in my first apartment, a complex for college students. The complex gave us a separate bedroom and bathroom, but the kitchen and dinner room were common. There was one kitchen per floor. As you'd expect, dinner time was crowded, but we managed. Quickly I noticed a guy. He always did the same thing. He came, prepared a quick meal, put it in the induction hob and left. I noticed him for 2 reasons. First, I find it odd to leave the kitchen while cooking. If you cook a long meal, I get it, but a quick meal? The second reasons were because he left for an unreasonable time. His main meal was a 3-minute rice, but he usually left for 20 to 30 minutes. So while I was cooking, then eating in the kitchen area, I'd often stop the pan and evacuate the water to not have the rice turn bad. After multiple times, I tried to tell him whatever he did, his rice was only cooking for 3 minutes, and since his activities took him 20 minutes each time, he should take care of his meal. But he cut me off, told me to mind my business. I told him that he wasn't nice, but I will indeed stop taking care of his meal now. And it would turn bad. He smirked, telling me there are a lot of people on the floor and someone will do it anyway. A few days later, I can see his pan with rice again, and someone else decided to take care of it. That person ended up sitting at my table to eat and asked about the rice without the owner when everyone was eating. So I told her about the guy who constantly let other people do his cooking for him. She tells me I was being mean and we should help each other. I told her I won't stop her from cooking for him, but he's going to be ungrateful. She didn't like my answer and stayed silent. I saw her taking care of his food multiple times after that. Then one day she caught the man fleeing the kitchen and ran after him. She came back and sat right next to me. She wanted to vent about how the man was a brat. I laugh and say, "I told you." The second scenario repeated 5 times, but the last 2 were easier since 3 people were telling me the same thing. At some point, someone asked the dude what he was doing to ditch his meal every day. Video games. After our team of 5 were formed, I noticed one thing. Basically, no one was helping him do anything in the kitchen. The only one who did was us 5. There were 20 per floor. It wasn't a big building, only 100 rooms for 5 floors. So with us not helping him anymore, his rice would finally turn bad. I talked to the others about it, and we decided to see the show. We came earlier than usual, cooked, ate, and just hung out in the kitchen. Then the man came, as usual. He put the water in the pan, added the 3-minute rice and left. The times he came back was random, usually around 20 or 30 minutes, the worst was an hour. We waited, 3 minutes passed and he wasn't there, as expected. Others started to come and make their meals. Sometimes they would ask about the abandoned rice. So we just explained that the owner was in his room playing video games. They all shrugged and continued their business. Nobody even tried to help. Oh, and he set the heat at max temperature too. After 30 minutes, we expected him to finally come, but he didn't. Feeling interested in science, I never saw overcooked rice before, well, not that overcooked. I approached the pan to look at the rice. I take a fork and dig a little. They ask what it looks like. I answered that the rice looked completely fine if untouched, but would disintegrate into a fine powder in the water with my fork. At 30 or 50 minutes, he still wasn't there. Most people had finished eating and would return to the room by now. 2 of the group decided to leave too. At 1 hour, someone checked the state of the rice and said the water was evaporated. It was proposed to stop the induction hob to not risk a fire, but we decided not to, mostly because we were there. The other 2 decided to leave, having better things to do. I think about it myself, but hey, I'm patient and petty, and I wanted to see his face in front of that pan. I was then waiting by myself. At 1 hour and 30 minutes, I checked the rice. As expected, the bottom was very dark. At 2 hours, one of the 4 saw me alone in the kitchen. The conversation went as follows. OP, yes? What are you doing alone in the kitchen? Wait, are you still watching? Yes. You didn't get his rice yet? No, he didn't. What the? But I took a shower and watched TV. The rice is cooking since when? It's been 2 hours now. No, that's impossible. I used the chronometer on my phone. The induction hob is off, right? No, I didn't put it off, but I opened the window for the burn odor. She approaches the pan and declares the rice is burnt. She quickly left the kitchen, excited. 1 hour and 10 minutes later, she came back with 3 others and snacks. Everyone wanted to see the state of the rice. Someone tried to dig with a wooden spoon and declared the pan was damaged. She couldn't dig at all. The rice is melted, and now part of the pan. I don't know much about it. I never had a dish burned that much, but I agree that cleaning it would be a challenge. At 2 hours and 15 minutes, I checked the rice. Not a single grain was white anymore. At 2 hours and 30 minutes, look who came, the man. He finally shows his nose in the kitchen. We look at him with anticipation. He looked at us a little puzzled, but went to his pan. He looked at his rice and then he froze. He didn't move for a while. He tries to take his pan off the induction hob but burnt himself in the metallic handle. We all look at him, amused. He looks at us, still choked, and asks where was his food. We told him, in his pan. He said there's no way. He always finds his rice around. We told him no one touched his food. Didn't he put the rice in the pan himself? He argued that usually he just has to put the rice in and go to his room, and when he comes back, someone has took it off for him. But sometimes, with everyone moving around, he finds his rice in odd places, like on the oven. But he didn't see any rice in the kitchen. We told him that indeed that's what would happen, but he told each of us to mind our business, so none of us touched his food today. I think he then realized who we were. He looked alternatively at the pan and us. He looks at the pan again. He then asks us what he would eat now. We answer that we don't know. He can still make more rice, but he has to stay nearby because we will not help him anymore. He looks at us and tries to touch the pan again. He succeeded in moving it using his shirt on the handle. He put it in the sink with cold water. He tries to clean it, but quickly looks at us again and asks how he should clean it. We don't know, really. He looks at us in despair. He said he only has one pan. We laughed, and I left after that. I know that 2 people stayed, but I saw what I wanted. While he still went to his room after putting his meal in the pan, he comes back around 5 minutes later after that, then eventually just stopped going to his room. I guess the round trip was a hassle for just a few minutes. Outside of that, I noticed that he had a brand new pan. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge's Ice Cream, episode 320. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please do poke the like button before you go, it helps the channel a lot. And if you'd like to get early access to the content, then you can do so by supporting me on my Patreon, which is linked in the description. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store. Christmas is coming up, just saying. And if you'd like to support the channel on a more one-off basis, then if you hit that little heart with a $sign in it below the video, then you can make donations to the channel during videos or streams. And while you don't have to do this, I very much appreciate it, and it's been helping me quite a bit. Okay, I don't think we have any other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... And this one tags on from the question I asked in the last Revenge video, and that what is a Christmas or a holiday movie that isn't actually a holiday movie? Like something you always just watch around the holiday period because you have associations of that from childhood or for other reasons perhaps. For me, it's always James Bond movies. I don't know if they still do it nowadays, but it used to always be you'd get a Bond movie, or maybe a couple of Bond movies, around about Christmas time in the UK on television. So I've always got memories of like school holidays, like off, during the festive season, snuggled up at night watching James Bond do his thing. Although I'm actually a little bit behind with the current Bond movies, I don't think I've seen the last 2. But why don't you let me know what some of yours are in a comment below. I look forward to reading your answers. Maybe I'll find some movies I haven't seen. Well, there's a lot of movies I haven't seen. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.